If you've watched any amount of courtroom dramas on television, you probably have an idea about how juries are selected, what information that they're given regarding a case, and how these things work. Today, we're going to talk about how wrong you are because it's not like that at all, at least not here in Maryland. Good morning, everybody. It's Jobeth Bowers, your Cecil County accident and injury guy. I'm coming at you again right here from my Elkton office. And I know the background, it's weird. We moved in here. It's been 2 months. I haven't gotten around to filling the wall yet. We're going to work on that in the next couple of weeks. So you may notice some changes behind me. And one of these days, I'll do a podcast episode talking about why there are football pictures behind me for not the Ravens or the Eagles, the local teams that you're either a fan of one or the other, or maybe you moved here from somewhere else. Because as I fill this wall, there will be many, many more of those photos, but that's not for today. Before we get into this week's topic, I also want to remind everybody that we are getting to the end of August, which means we are getting close to the end of the opportunity to win a pair of Ravens tickets to a game later this season. I mean, the season hasn't started yet, so they're all going to be later this season. But next week's podcast, no, the following week's podcast, so it's 2 weeks from now, we're going to be doing the drawing actually on a Tuesday because of Labor Day. We're going to do a drawing from everybody who's entered the free insurance review contest, and somebody's going to win a pair of tickets. And I've got news for you. We must have gotten the bulk of our submissions when we did this back in April because we have a very, very small, less than what I was hoping for number of entries. I mean, less than 50. So you have a high likelihood, if you enter this contest now, of being selected for 2 tickets. I really think we have like 15 people that are signed up. So your odds are tremendous to win these tickets. So make sure you go to marylandinsuranceBook.com. It's absolutely free. It's going to give you an option. Let me tell you how this works. When you go through the process, and the most important thing is that you're going to upload what's called your declarations page. It is, and maybe I'm going to do a podcast episode that walks through what that is so that you know how to find it. And it's going to be a little too late, but it should be anywhere where the display of your the different types of coverage in your policy are. A lot of times the cost associated with it is on the right. I just need a screenshot or a download of that page to be able to churn and do the thing. After you've submitted it, it's going to offer you an opportunity to book a time to discuss this with me. You don't have to do that. You're more than welcome to. It's also free. It'll be a great opportunity to say, hey, what does this do? And if I were in an accident, what does that mean? And how does all of this work? I am happy to spend that time with absolutely anybody that is willing to spend that time with me to talk through these things, because what I have learned in almost 20 years of doing this type of work, 12 here in Elkton exclusively, is that most people have no clue. So it takes somebody like me to lay it all out there for you, and I'm absolutely happy to do so. Which brings us to today's topic, and that is juries. All right, juries in Maryland. We're going to cover a lot of topics. I'm going to say some nasty things that the insurance company does not want you to know, does not want you to hear. But more importantly, I want to talk about that process, because a lot of people are scared of taking their case to trial. A lot of people are apprehensive about what that involves. They're nervous about it. First, I'll tell you that the vast majority of these cases, regardless of value, regardless of merits, regardless of anything, rarely do they actually go all the way to trial and verdict and to the finish line. In fact, here in Cecil County, despite our best efforts, we try a case in front of a jury less than once a year. It's close to that. It's really more like once every 18 months, We don't have a ton of control over it, but every single case does not go to trial. In fact, most cases do not. But it's important to understand, as one of the factors going into it, what really goes into a jury. How do we select them? What do they know? What do they not know? And that's going to be getting into where some of the stuff about me saying things that insurance companies don't want you to know is going to come into play. But let's talk about selecting that jury first. All right. On television, as I led in with it, there is a kind of perceived, displayed, dramatized view of what jury selection is. In fact, there are television shows about folks who set up these alleged mirror juries so that the 6 or 8 or 12 or 14 people that are sitting in this quote mirror jury, I'm talking about the television show Bull, which I think has concluded its run, but it was definitely a fun and entertaining show. But when you watch shows like Bull, when you watch shows like Suits, when you watch shows that are any legal drama, as a lawyer, all you want to do is yell at the TV. It's not how it goes. It's not right. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But if you were to watch a show as a professional in another profession about that profession, you're going to say many of the same things, because on television, we need to make it interesting. And it's kind of sort of sometimes like watching paint dry from the outside. Now, for us that are in the mix and doing the thing, we're highly engaged, but it's not the type of thing that really is exciting on television. So when we pick a jury in Maryland, it's very subdued, and it's definitely not like what's on TV. On TV, they would like you to think that the lawyers know everything about what makes that person tick, who they are, what they do for a living, what their hobbies are, all of those things. And none of that is the case, not here in Maryland. Now, we are going through a pilot process in Maryland to expand and enhance this process, but it's not fully to fruition yet. So in a year or 2 years, if this goes into place, I will do an updated episode that goes into detail as to how jury selection will change in the future. But for now, the attorneys for the parties that are involved, a week or so ahead of trial, will submit questions to the judge. And many of these are standard boilerplate questions that have been used for 100 years in many instances. And these are questions that are designed to determine if there are actual biases that the individual that's sitting there potentially being selected as a juror have. Can you be impartial? Or is there something, do you think, I'll give you an example, and this may come into play in either criminal or civil cases, but certainly in criminal, one of the questions that's fairly standard is, would you believe or give more credit to a law enforcement officer because of their position? Also, it's internally asking kind of the opposite of that question. Do you dislike or distrust law enforcement officers? When selecting a jury, we don't want either of those things. We don't want somebody who's going to give more weight to that person's testimony or less weight to that person's testimony because of who they are. And jury selection is a myriad of questions like this, but there's not a conversation. The room is filled. Once these questions are determined, hey, this is what we're going to ask. You gave me this list and you gave me that list and most of it matches up, but hey, these questions, this one's going to get asked and that one's not, or whatever. So the judge, the lawyers, all consolidate that list and say, these are the questions that we're asking of prospective jurors. Then the panel is brought in and they fill the room depending on the type of case. Certain types of cases, they like murder cases, they're going to have more people in there because they expect to dismiss more people. And this is typically the case for criminal cases because of certain constitutional rights that, and freedoms that folks have in being able to be as selective as possible with a jury. But they're going to ask these questions. And when they ask these questions, they're asking the question to the whole room. And the instructions that are given to jurors are, if the answer to the following questions is yes, stand up and stay standing until we record your juror number. So we ask all the questions, we record all of the yes responses. This is the tricky part right here. This is the part that makes juries such a mystery, is that let's say there's 100 people in the room. And the stand up for yes has happened. We've gone through 15 or 20 questions, whatever it is, different for different types of cases. Do you know these people? Do you know the lawyers? Whatever. If there are enough jurors, prospective jurors, that didn't say yes to any of the questions, oftentimes, not every time, but oftentimes, the judge will say, hey, you 8 people there, come over here. Any reason you can't be this jury? No? Okay, you're the jury. And that's it. Without recording a response from a single person that's sitting there. In fact, back when I was in law school, I was given the opportunity. I was part of this clinical program at the University of Baltimore that while I was still a law student, I was permitted for one semester to practice law in a very limited capacity. It was through the public defender's office here in Cecil County. I was only allowed to do this under the supervision of one of their attorneys. So I was never alone in the room, always one of the PD attorneys there, because I was still a law student. I hadn't taken the bar. I hadn't finished law school. I hadn't passed the bar, been sworn in, none of that. I didn't have legal malpractice insurance. Public defender's office did. I was operating under them, so it covered me. But a lot of things that were not in place to just let me go free will. Hey, go practice law. Have fun, buddy. That's not how it works. But I got to try a criminal case near the end of the semester. So we picked a jury. That's part of the process. And the 14 people, because it's 12 people on a criminal jury, 2 alternates, were placed in the box. And then the judge had the person number 1 stand up and ask them a few questions to see if they were willing to and comfortable being the foreperson of the jury, to which that person, after hearing the judge's question, responded, okay? Because that person did not speak English. Certainly not fluently, maybe not at all. Clearly, without an interpreter in the room, and arguably with an interpreter in the room, not the best person to be a jury member. But they didn't stand up for any of the questions. So they got put in the box. This doesn't happen all the time. This is probably a very isolated incident, but it illustrates the fact that you might have a jury of people that just weren't paying attention that day for one reason or another, and that's why they're sitting over there. There might be one of them that, again, just wasn't paying attention. It doesn't have to be a language barrier thing, but you don't necessarily know what you're going to get when it comes to a jury. That introduces a risk for both sides. Both sides, both the prosecution and the defense, the plaintiff and the defendant, depending on whether it's a civil or a criminal jury. And then it comes down to, what do the jurors know? What do they know about your case? And the answer to that question should be, and something that is supposed to be solidified through the selection process, is that they're supposed to know absolutely nothing about the case. They're instructed to not investigate the case, to not investigate the location. So if it's a multi-day trial, they are told, don't go out to that intersection. Don't go out to the site of that crime. Do not do any of your own investigations. Do not hop on to Google, Bing, or any other search engine and say, hey, what can you tell me about whatever the situation is? Because again, there's all sorts of juries for all sorts of types of cases. They're not supposed to do any independent research. And the part that I'm going to tell you now, which I have preached about on this podcast, because this podcast to the public is a forum where it's totally permissible for me to tell you and inform you that if you are in a civil trial and it is a lawsuit for damages, there is an overwhelming predominance that the verdict that you render is not, I repeat, not going to be paid directly by the individual sitting at counsel table. It's going to be paid by an insurance company. In fact, the attorney that is sitting there, or the team of attorneys, depending on the size of the case, are paid for by the insurance company. The experts, the doctors that are hired to come in and say that you're not hurt, are paid for by the insurance company. These insurance companies spend millions and millions of dollars every single year to try to pay you, the injured person, less money. And we're not allowed to tell the jury that an insurance company is even involved. Why? Because the process is set up to be fair, and that fairness also extends to the insurance company, who's technically not a party. Because in reality, you're already sitting there thinking to myself, well, what do I care that we throw a huge number that an insurance company is going to have to pay? I sure know they've taken enough money from me and my family over the years. It's about time they pay some of it back. That's why we're not allowed to tell juries that, hey, I know we have Johnny over here that's the defendant that caused this accident, and we want you to think that Johnny is this nice guy and it was just an accident, which of course it probably was, but Johnny's not paying the bills, so don't feel sorry for Johnny. It's Johnny's insurance company. You think Johnny forked out tens of thousands of dollars for that attorney and $20,000 for that orthopedic doctor to say that, my client who was in pieces on the roadway isn't hurt? Because that's what they'll do. The insurance company's going to walk right up to you at the accident scene, cut in half at your torso, and say, rub some dirt on it. Go back to work. Have a nice day. That's what they want you to think. Why? Because it's profits over people. I think we all know to some extent that that's the case. The big corporations in this country, in this world, are doing everything that they can to take what they can and not give back to the normal people. So it's important to know that the jury knows absolutely nothing, or at least they're supposed to know absolutely nothing about your case before you go into it. And it's all supposed to be delivered through the channels of that trial, through witness testimony, through your testimony, through medical bills and records, through testimony of, family who have observed the differences in your life, friends, coworkers, especially people without a vested interest financially in the case, to say, hey, we used to go fishing all the time, or we used to ride motorcycles every other weekend, or whatever it is that you don't do nearly as much, or you can't enjoy nearly as much because of the injuries caused from this accident. A jury has no way to know that unless they find out about it in that room, because they are instructed not to research the parties, not to research the lawyers, not to research anything about the situation. And again, this is the same, whether it's a civil case, whether it's a criminal case. If there's a jury, they're instructed not to do their own research, not to do their own homework. And I think that part is right, but I think it's important that if you're ever selected for a jury, that, hey, if there's a lawyer sitting there and this is an accident case, there's an insurance company behind there that nobody's going to tell you about. So if you think it's warranted, give the person what they deserve. It's not about the person who caused the accident. Again, this is the nasty, nasty thing that the insurance company doesn't want you to know. And if we're right next door out at the circuit courthouse, I'm not allowed to tell you when we're in that room, but I can tell you here. So it's a very, very, it's designed to be impartial, but it's super unscientific, and it's a wild card. And if you're a client of mine, we're totally going to talk about that through each step of the process where it's relevant of how far do we take this. What I've experienced, though, in years of practice here is that sometimes it just takes being prepared, being aggressive, and pushing the ticket as far as possible. A lot of times, even and some of our largest cases have tickled the courtroom. And literally 10 days before trial, okay, fine, we're going to settle the case. Here's your money. So sometimes it takes that patience. Sometimes it takes trust in your legal team that they know what they're doing, that they understand the jurisdiction, and they understand how things work around here, which is why we exclusively handle these cases here in Cecil County. If you call us with an accident case from somewhere else in the state, we have trusted partners that we work with there, but we only really handle primarily accidents that happened here in Cecil County or involving members of the community who live here in Cecil County. So if you got in an accident somewhere else, but you live here in Cecil County, give us a call. We're happy to help you. If you live somewhere else and the accident happened somewhere else, it's a high likelihood that we're going to help, and we're going to line you up with somebody that's closer to where that is, because understanding the dynamics of that market and that community are so important to trying these things. So this was supposed to be a short episode, and here we are at 21 minutes, probably the longest episode that I've done in a long time. So that's got to be, the hook is coming. It's time for me to get off this stage, but I appreciate you spending the time with me. I appreciate anybody who either checks these out after the fact or tunes in during the broadcast. It's been almost 3 years that I've been doing these and live streaming them, and it's been great to share this information. So please tell a friend. We'll be right back here next week at 11 a.m. or obviously on YouTube or the website. If you want to catch those back episodes, best place to do it is go to bowerslawmd.com. Navigate right up there at the top. This is what the website currently looks like. Up at the top is a scroll bar that says podcast. Just click that. You'll find all of the back episodes. By this time tomorrow, this episode will be there. So anything on any topic. And don't forget, MarylandInsuranceBook.com. Let me review your insurance policy. It's absolutely free. I am not, I repeat, not an insurance agent. So what you're not going to get from me is a quote. What you're not going to get from me is a sales pitch. You're going to get information. You're going to get a report card and a one-on-one chat, if and only if you want it, that says, hey, take a look at these things. You take that report card. You go to your insurance agent and say, hey, can I see some prices on this stuff? And then you make the decisions of what makes sense in your budget. I'm going to talk to you or explain on this report card how these parts of your policy play into and impact you and benefit you if you were to be in an accident, but I'm not writing the policy. It's just not what I do. I'm here to educate and provide you with some information. So that's all I have for this week. I guess I got to plug the fact that if you have a question for the podcast, hit me up, info@bowerslawmd.com. Make sure you mention that you want me to talk about it on the podcast, or I might not. I might just privately respond to you. So if it's a podcast topic, make sure I know it is. If it's not about accident, injuries, or auto insurance, that's cool. Send me the question, because I will find somebody that works in that realm that actually knows what they're talking about. We've had guests on the podcast that have talked about other types of injury cases, that have talked about criminal law, traffic law, expungements, property, inheritance, and estate planning. All that stuff's been covered here. So, and not by me, because it's not what I do. I'll bring in a guest. They're the expert. We'll talk about what your topic is. So that's all I have for this week. Thanks again for tuning in. Be safe, be well,